My name is Isabel Harper, and I'm 32 years old. For most of my life, I've been the quiet one, in the Harper family, an afterthought in conversations dominated by louder, flashier personalities. My older sister, Bianca, has always been the star, a corporate strategist with a talent for attention, a social calendar booked months in advance, and a knack for letting everyone know just how successful she is. And every year, like clockwork, our extended family goes on a lavish cruise together. Except this year, things were different. I wasn't invited, and let me ask you this. If you were excluded from something your family believed you couldn't afford, how would you show them what you're really made of? Would you prove your worth quietly, or would you dock your yacht right beside theirs? Let me know in the comments below. And if stories like these resonate with you, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more moments of revenge served with style. It wasn't just an oversight or a scheduling mishap, it was deliberate. I found out about the cruise from a photo Bianca posted on social media, a luxurious deck shot, champagne in hand, captioned, "Family time at its finest." My name wasn't in the group chat. No invitation, no explanation. Just silence. I scrolled through the comments and saw everyone congratulating her on organizing the biggest Harper getaway yet. One reply caught my eye, something she had commented herself. "We all chipped in, but let's be honest, some people just can't afford this kind of thing." It didn't take much to read between the lines. Bianca wasn't just going on the cruise. She had planned it, led it, and very publicly made sure I wasn't part of it. That hurt more than I wanted to admit. Not because I couldn't afford it, but because she assumed I couldn't, and worse, made that the public narrative. That was the thing with Bianca. She had a way of insulting you with a smile, like she was doing you a favor by leaving you behind. It wasn't always this way. As kids, we were close. I used to braid her hair and help her sneak snacks past Mom. But after college, she started climbing ladders I had no interest in: corporate, social, financial. And the space between us widened. I chose a different route, one that didn't come with company cars or branded tote bags. I launched my own digital design firm, small and scrappy at first, operating out of my cramped apartment, working ridiculous hours with little to show for it. But I believed in it. Over the past 5 years, I'd slowly built something meaningful, quietly, without flashing it in anyone's face. And that's probably why they didn't notice. To my family, especially Bianca, I was still the one who showed up to dinners in jeans and sneakers, who didn't drop brand names or talk about stock options. They saw me as modest, humble, or in their eyes broke, and Bianca's narrative became everyone's assumption. Izzy's doing her thing, probably freelancing, who knows if she's making anything. They had no idea that I had just signed a multi-million-dollar contract with an international hospitality brand to lead a full rebranding campaign, or that I had recently bought my second property, a waterfront condo with a view they'd kill for. But none of that mattered, because in their minds, I was too broke for the cruise. I sat on the edge of my bed the night I saw that photo, staring at the screen while resentment simmered just beneath the surface. It wasn't about the cruise. It was about being dismissed, about being left out, about them writing my story for me without even asking, and worst of all, about Bianca turning the entire thing into a performance. I could have called, could have asked why, but what was the point? I already knew the answer. I wasn't flashy enough. I didn't show off my wealth or status, so in their eyes it didn't exist. But the thing about being underestimated, it gives you power. I didn't just want to prove them wrong. I wanted to do it in a way they'd never forget. So I made a phone call, not to my sister, not to my mother. I called the captain of a private charter company I had worked with during a previous project. They handled luxury yacht rentals for exclusive clients, and I knew exactly what I wanted. The next week, while my family sipped cocktails on the deck of the S. Platinum Pearl, I had my own arrangements finalized. The day they set sail, so did I, but from a different dock aboard the Serenity Blue, a 90-foot luxury yacht complete with an onboard chef, a full crew, and even a water-level lounge with glass flooring. But I wasn't there just to relax. No, I had a very specific route in mind, one that would lead me casually, unbothered, to dock right beside theirs at their next port. My yacht captain confirmed the logistics. My assistant confirmed the timing, and I made sure the crew was briefed with one very clear instruction. When we dock, make it look like I've been doing this all year. I won't lie. I was nervous. Not because of the money or the stunt, but because deep down, some part of me still wanted their approval, still wanted them to be proud, to say, "We were wrong about you, Izzy." I knew I shouldn't care, but old wounds don't close that easily. The morning we arrived at the same island port as the cruise ship, my heart pounded as I watched their vessel pulling in beside mine. I stood on the upper deck, sunglasses on, coffee in hand, dressed in the casual elegance Bianca always claimed I lacked. From their deck I saw heads turn, confused faces, whispered words, then I saw her, Bianca. She was standing on the upper balcony of her cruise suite mid-laugh until her gaze locked on me. Her laughter faded. Her jaw visibly dropped. She turned to someone beside her, probably Mom, and pointed toward my yacht like she had seen a ghost. I smiled politely, raised my coffee cup in a soft salute, and turned back to enjoy the morning breeze. I hadn't just arrived. I had arrived in a way they couldn't ignore. The tension between me and Miranda simmered beneath every polite exchange at the family's luxury boarding gate. Even though I had smiled through her cruel assumption that I was too poor to join them, my mind was already 2 steps ahead. I had spent years being underestimated, first by my family, then by acquaintances, and most notably by Miranda. What she didn't know was that my apparent absence from this year's family cruise wasn't because I couldn't afford it. It was because I'd been quietly building a business empire while she was busy spending Dad's money. While she flaunted her luxury designer luggage and shouted instructions to the porters like she owned the dock, I sat quietly at a nearby marina cafe, sipping espresso and watching their every move from behind polarized sunglasses. The funny thing was, the staff she was barking orders at had just finished coordinating my own crew not an hour ago. That morning, I had signed off on the final arrangements aboard my newly purchased custom-built yacht, Serenity's Wake. It was sleek, understated elegance. Nothing too flashy, but its value was triple that of the cruise ship Miranda had booked for the family. I didn't buy it for the purpose of proving anything. I bought it because I could, and because piece drew piece deserved to sail on its own terms. But now it had another purpose, showing them exactly what I had built while they laughed behind my back. The contrast between Miranda's loud, performative lifestyle and my quiet, strategic ascent couldn't have been starker. She had inherited comfort, I had earned freedom. She had followers, I had a legacy, but my family couldn't see that yet. To them, I was still little Cassie, the artsy sister who turned down law school, who preferred books over brunches, and who hadn't posted a single flex photo on social media in over 3 years. In their eyes that made me broke, invisible, unimportant, I watched as the family began boarding the ship. Mom had her usual overly structured bob haircut, and that pearl necklace she only wore when she knew pictures would be taken. Dad looked relaxed, oblivious as usual, probably just excited about the endless supply of buffet shrimp. Then came Miranda, strutting like a peacock, wearing heels inappropriate for a dock and sunglasses too large for her face. She tossed her hair dramatically as she passed the dock agents, no doubt feeling triumphant for keeping me away from their annual tradition. What none of them knew was that I had arranged to dock Serenity's Wake, right beside their cruise ship later that evening, just as the family would be enjoying their welcome dinner on the open-air deck. My captain, Tomas, had coordinated everything discreetly. I would arrive, step out in a modest white linen dress with simple gold sandals. Nothing over the top, just enough elegance to catch the eye without screaming for attention. My plan wasn't to humiliate Miranda. It was to shift the balance of respect, to make them question everything they thought they knew about me. I'd spent the past 7 years building a luxury travel tech platform, a company that allowed high-net-worth individuals to plan seamless private retreats through AI-powered itinerary matching. What started as a side hustle turned into a company with clients across 3 continents. My last funding round had raised over $30 million. I had 2 assistants, a crew, and a remote development team of 15. But to my family, I was still finding my path. Why? Because I never bragged. Because I never needed validation through external displays. Until now, my phone buzzed. A message from Tomas. We're on schedule. Final checks complete. Ready when you are, MS Cassandra. I typed back, perfect. Proceed as planned. I'll arrive just after sunset. As the cruise ship pulled away from the dock, a familiar ache nestled in my chest. Despite everything, a part of me still wished they'd invited me properly. Not as a courtesy, not as an afterthought, but as someone whose presence mattered. Miranda's petty dig about me being too broke hurt more than I wanted to admit, not because it was true, but because it revealed how little she knew me anymore, or perhaps how little she ever did. Back in my hotel suite, I changed into my evening attire and gathered the small gift box I had prepared. A hand-stitched journal with our family crest on the cover, filled with personal letters I had written for each member of the family. I had originally planned to give it to them before the cruise. Now I'd let the timing, and the tides, decide when they received it. At precisely 6:43 p.m., as the golden hues of sunset spilled across the marina, Serenity's wake sliced through the water and docked gently beside the cruise ship. The sound of the yacht's horn startled a few diners on the upper deck of the cruise liner. Heads turned, forks paused midair, and then I stepped onto the main deck, the wind catching my hair just slightly, my posture calm and composed. Across the railing, I locked eyes with Miranda, who had just taken a sip of wine. She choked. My brother Devin dropped his bread roll. Dad stared like he was seeing a ghost. Mom's mouth opened in disbelief. I offered a graceful wave. I didn't need to say a word. Tomorrow, the real conversations would begin. But tonight was for presence, for making it unmistakably clear that I was not the forgotten sibling, or the one who couldn't afford it. I was the storm they never saw coming. And now I want to ask you, have you ever been underestimated by your own family, only to rise far beyond what they thought possible? Drop your stories in the comments below. Let's talk about it. And if you're enjoying this journey, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more moments of quiet revenge and powerful comebacks. The next morning arrived cloaked in golden sunlight, and with it, an atmosphere that was dramatically different from the icy reception the night before. Word of my yacht's arrival had spread throughout the ship. Apparently, Miranda had tried to downplay it, spinning some story about me renting a boat for attention. But too many people had seen the truth. The crew, the other guests, even the ship's entertainment coordinator had come by to ask who I was and how I managed such a vessel. Whispers floated through the corridors like perfume. She docked it herself. She owns the company. She built everything from scratch, and through it all I remained composed. I wasn't there for a scene. I was there to reclaim my dignity. After breakfast, I stepped onto the cruise deck dressed in smart, crisp white trousers and a sleeveless navy blouse, hair pulled into a clean ponytail, not to prove a point, not to be dramatic, but to look exactly like what I was, confident, prepared, and unshaken. Miranda was sitting by the pool, surrounded by her usual gallery of followers, our cousin Natalie, her friend Claire, and a few distant family acquaintances who clung to her like satellites orbiting a fading star. She was in the middle of some anecdote, laughing too loudly, clearly overcompensating. But when she saw me approach, her expression faltered just slightly, a hairline crack in the polished porcelain. "Cassie," she said flatly, adjusting her sunglasses. "Didn't expect you on deck this early. Sleep on the yacht." I offered a pleasant smile. "Slept like a dream. The ocean's calmer when you're on your own schedule." Claire snickered. Miranda shot her a glance. "That's cute," she said coolly, "though I have to say, arriving like that last night, bit dramatic, don't you think? Only if I'd done it for drama." I replied, keeping my tone light. "But I didn't. I was invited to this cruise last minute, remember. I simply brought my own room." Natalie choked on her mimosa. Miranda blinked. The conversation shifted after that. I moved toward the bar, and several extended family members I hadn't spoken to in years stopped me with congratulations and questions. How had I done it? What did I actually do? Was it true I had clients in Dubai, in Milan, in Hong Kong? I answered kindly but didn't overshare. I wasn't there to boast. I was there to let the facts speak for themselves. By lunchtime, Mom found me at the upper deck lounge. "I want to talk," she said, her expression pinched between curiosity and discomfort. "Of course," I said, setting down my iced tea. She sat opposite me and glanced around. "You made quite an entrance last night." "Unintentional. I just docked where they told me." She pursed her lips. "Cassie, you know we never thought poorly of you. But you never talked about your work. It always felt like you were drifting." "I wasn't drifting," I said gently. "I was building, but I stopped telling you about it because no one ever asked." Every time we talked, the conversation turned back to Miranda or her new handbags or some wedding she attended. I didn't feel seen. My mother's face softened just a little. "We didn't mean to ignore you, I know," I said, "but meaning well isn't the same as doing well." She looked down at her hands. "Your father, he's proud of you. He told me this morning. Said your yacht made the other investors on this ship look like amateurs." I smiled despite myself. "That's sweet of him." There was a long pause. Then she asked, "Are you successful, truly?" I leaned forward. "Mom, I've been able to buy my freedom. I own the company. I've employed over 30 people. I paid off my student loans. I helped my co-founder's daughter get life saving surgery last year. I could retire now if I wanted." She stared at me, stunned. "Why didn't you tell us?" "I didn't need to," I said simply. "I needed to live it. And maybe I wanted the moment to come when I didn't have to convince anyone anymore." That evening, we docked at a private island owned by one of the cruise's corporate partners. The family gathered for a special dinner by the water. As we arrived, the staff greeted us warmly, but I noticed something new. People recognized me now, not as Miranda's quiet sister, not as the artistic one, as Cassandra Burke, the founder of a fast-rising tech startup, the woman who sailed her own yacht into port. Even Miranda had started to shift. She avoided eye contact more than usual, her snide remarks less frequent, her laughter less sharp-edged. It wasn't fear. It was realization. The tide had turned, and she didn't know how to sail in it. At one point during dinner, my younger cousin Josh raised a toast to Cassie. He said, grinning, "Who showed us that quiet waters run deep, and that sometimes the ones we underestimate are building empires in silence." Everyone clapped, even Miranda, albeit hesitantly. Dad stood and gave me a nod across the table, the kind of nod that says, "I see you now." That night I returned to Serenity's wake under a sky filled with stars. The sea was calm, moonlight shimmering across the surface. I walked barefoot on the deck, thinking about how far I'd come, not just in distance but in presence. I no longer needed approval. I didn't seek validation, but I had earned acknowledgement. Miranda's cruelty had given me a gift. Her condescension had given me clarity. And when my feet touched the teak floor of my yacht, I felt something powerful settle in my chest. They had finally seen who I truly was. The morning of the final gala arrived, the last night of the cruise. A formal affair where families dressed their finest, mingled with business elites, and dined under fairy lights on the open-air deck. It was the crown jewel of the entire trip, and Miranda had been talking about it for weeks. Her Instagram stories had been flooded with snippets about her designer gown, the luxury jewelry she was borrowing from her favorite boutique, and how she was going to be seated next to a retired senator's wife. So when I stepped out of my yacht and onto the red carpet leading to the gala in a sleek navy velvet gown, custom designed by a friend in Paris, heads turned. Not just because of the dress, but because of the aura. I no longer looked like someone they could dismiss. I looked like someone they had to acknowledge. Miranda was already at the gala when I entered. She froze when she saw me walking toward the guest tables, but quickly recovered with a sip of her champagne. The rest of the family was seated at the far right table, decked in semi-formal wear, laughing and chatting as if the past few days hadn't happened. I made my way to the host table, the one closest to the stage. "Miss Burke," one of the organizers greeted me warmly. "We've reserved a seat for you near the guest of honor." I nodded graciously, "Thank you." My name had appeared in the evening's program as a special guest, which was already causing murmurs throughout the crowd. It wasn't just the yacht anymore. People had looked me up. They'd read about the startup, the recent acquisition offer we'd turned down, and our expansion into international markets. I had gone from being Miranda's broke sister to being a conversation everyone wanted to join. Just before the speeches began, Miranda came over. She smiled, tight and brittle. "So," she said sweetly, "sitting with the headliners now." "Seems so," I replied, keeping my tone light. She hesitated. "You look nice." I knew that in Miranda's beak that was as close to a compliment as she could manage. "Thanks." I said, "You too." For a brief moment her armor cracked. "Cassie," she said quietly. I didn't know. I turned to face her, didn't know what. "That you'd actually made it. I always thought," she faltered. "You were always so quiet and different. I assumed you were just coasting." I nodded slowly. "You assumed a lot. You told everyone I couldn't afford this cruise." She looked down. I did. But I wasn't trying to impress anyone. I said gently, "I came to be part of the family. You made sure I felt like an outsider before I even stepped on board." Miranda swallowed hard. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I was wrong. It wasn't much, but it was more than I ever expected." And in her eyes I saw something else, regret and the early glimmer of respect. She walked back to her table, and I returned to mine just as the event's host took the stage to welcome the guests and announce the evening's main speakers. To my surprise, one of them was the CEO of a tech conglomerate I had been trying to get in touch with for months. He was introduced as a guest of honor, seated just 2 chairs away from me. When the program paused for the dinner course, I took the opportunity to introduce myself. "Mr. Halbridge," I said, offering a handshake. "Cassandra Burke. I run Haven Point Systems. We work in AI integrated logistics." His eyes lit up. "Oh, I've heard of Haven Point. You're the founder, co-founder and CEO." He grinned. "Impressive. Your software was part of the logistics package we evaluated for the Geneva expansion. You were ahead of everyone else in the model testing." "Still are," I replied, and we both laughed. We spent the next half hour talking shop, exchanging ideas and possibilities. By the time dessert was served, he'd already asked to set up a formal meeting once the cruise ended. "You're doing good work," he said. "And frankly, the world needs more women like you at the helm." Across the room, I saw Miranda watching. Her gaze wasn't envious anymore. It was curious, thoughtful. She was seeing me not as the sibling who colored outside the lines, but as someone who built the entire canvas. After dinner, I returned to my yacht to breathe, to let the night sink in. I stood on the deck, the waves gently rocking the hull, thinking about the entire journey. Not just this cruise, but the years that had led up to it. The rejection, the underestimation, the loneliness of forging my path when no one, especially my own family, thought it would amount to anything. They hadn't believed in me, but I had. I had trusted the fire inside me that said I didn't need to fit into their mold. I needed to build something new. And I had, as fireworks lit up the sky above the cruise ship. I sat beneath them in silence, watching color burst over the water. I didn't need applause. I didn't crave a standing ovation. My presence here on my own terms was the climax I'd been working toward all along. And somehow, quietly, that made it even more powerful. The morning after the gala dawned clear and golden, the sea stretching out like polished glass as the cruise ship prepared to return to port. As the crew prepared for disembarkation, families bustled about in the usual frenzy of packing last-minute photos and goodbyes. But unlike the anxiety that clouded my arrival, I felt grounded, not triumphant, something deeper. Like I'd finally anchored myself after years of drifting in my family's blind spots. I sipped coffee on the deck of my yacht, watching as cruise passengers stepped out onto their balconies. Most didn't notice me, but a few pointed, speculating. A yacht of that size and elegance parked beside a commercial cruise liner was unusual. They probably assumed I was some heiress, a silent investor, someone untouchable. In a way, I was all those things, but not by birthright. By sweat, persistence, and faith in my own path. There was a knock on the side rail gate. I turned and saw my sister Miranda standing on the dock in her white travel outfit, looking uncharacteristically small against the backdrop of towering ships and chaos. I gestured for my steward to lower the ramp. She walked up slowly, her heels clicking against the polished teak deck. "I wasn't sure if I should come," she said. "I thought maybe we could talk, just you and me, without the spectacle." I motioned to a shaded seating area. "Of course, sit." For a moment neither of us spoke. She glanced around, taking in the elegant layout, the high-tech navigation systems, the understated luxury of it all. "This is incredible," she finally said. "I still can't wrap my head around it. You own this, yes." I replied simply, "and it's not my only one." Her eyes widened slightly, but she didn't try to cover the surprise. "How long?" 5 years since my first investment paid off. 2 years since I bought the company that now runs most of my operations. The rest, as they say, is scaling. Miranda gave a soft, almost sheepish laugh. "You really were building something all that time. I told you that." I reminded her gently. "You just didn't believe it." She stared at the horizon for a long time. "I didn't want to believe it. You were always the different one. Quiet, methodical, not the showy kind like me or Mom or the cousins. You didn't seem hungry for attention or applause. I thought that meant you had nothing going on. I didn't want to perform for approval," I said. "I wanted to build for legacy." Her head lowered. "I was cruel to you at the airport on the cruise before the trip even started. I told everyone you couldn't afford to come, and when you did, I was embarrassed, not because you came, but because you showed me up, not with money, but with calm, with self-respect. I didn't know how to handle that. I understand now that a lot of that wasn't just about me," I said carefully. "You were trying to hold on to something. Status, control, the family's spotlight. I just didn't fit into your story." "No, you didn't," she said. "But I see now that your story is the one worth telling." That admission held more weight than 1,000 apologies. I could see it was genuine, and Miranda wasn't trying to save face anymore. She was reaching out, not in defeat, but in hope. Hope that maybe we could find a new rhythm as sisters, now that the old power dynamic had finally crumbled. "I can't change how I treated you in the past," she continued, "but I don't want that to be our whole history." "It doesn't have to be," I said. "But I need honesty, not just from you, from the whole family. I'm not going to shrink myself anymore to make others comfortable." "You shouldn't," she said quickly. "And maybe you can teach me how to build something too. Not a yacht or a startup, just something for myself. I've been living in this world of appearances for so long, I forgot what it feels like to be real." I smiled. "Then let's start with that." We stood together on the deck, and for the first time in years, there was no competition, no sarcasm, no biting commentary. Just two sisters who had finally stopped trying to outshine one another and started to truly see one another. Later that afternoon, as passengers filed out through customs, I walked alongside Miranda and the rest of our family. They were quieter than usual, thoughtful, even reverent. My father, who had barely spoken to me throughout the trip, reached for my bag and carried it without a word. My mother offered me a smile that didn't feel forced. When we reached the front of the terminal, a black car with my company's logo pulled up. The driver stepped out and opened the door for me. "You have a driver now?" my cousin asked, half joking, half awed. "I have a team," I said simply, "and they're very good." As I turned to say goodbye, Miranda stepped forward. "Next family gathering," she said, "you'll be at the head table." "I'm not interested in tables anymore," I replied. "But I'll sit where I'm respected." She nodded, then beside me. The car pulled away as I looked back once more at the ship that had carried so many assumptions, and left them all behind on the water. I wasn't bitter. I wasn't even proud in the traditional sense. What I felt was something better. Peace. The girl they mocked, underestimated, and excluded had built a life not to prove them wrong, but to prove to herself that she never needed their permission to begin with. And now that they saw it, not only did I not need their validation, oddly, I was ready to accept it, because it came not from ego, but from growth, from their awakening, and from my refusal to give up on myself. Looking back on that surreal moment when my yacht cut through the marina waters and docked beside my family's cruise ship, I realized something profound, not just about success, but about how deeply rooted our need for validation can be. For years, I had worked in silence, drowning in the noise of others' opinions. My family's taunts, especially my sister's scornful remarks about my financial status, used to sting more than I ever let on. She had always worn her wealth like a badge, weaponizing it at every family gathering. And when I finally decided to skip one more humiliation and instead build something of my own, it wasn't revenge I wanted. It was respect earned, not handed, but the truth is, their lack of belief wasn't just about me. It was a mirror reflecting their limitations, their narrow view of what success should look like. They thought I was too quiet, too soft, too naive to make it in the world of business. And maybe I was at first. But what they didn't see were the countless nights I spent developing software, the emails I wrote to secure investors, the pitches I practiced alone in my apartment until my voice cracked. They didn't witness the sacrifices I made, like missing weddings, birthdays, even vacations, because I was pouring every ounce of myself into building a company from the ground up. That's why docking that yacht wasn't about showing off. It was about showing up for myself, for the version of me they ignored, and for every person who's ever been told they're not good enough, not wealthy enough, not strong enough to live their own dreams. The yacht was a symbol, but not of money. It was a symbol of independence, of breaking free from the narrative I was assigned. I didn't need to tell anyone I'd succeeded. The respect came not from bragging, but from proving it, calmly, confidently, and without apology. When the cruise ship's captain turned to salute me, and my family watched in stunned silence, I knew that moment said more than any argument ever could. My sister never apologized, not really, but she did come over to my yacht the next day. She looked around at the polished wood decks, the custom interior, the quiet confidence that surrounded the space. "I didn't know you were doing so well," she muttered, not quite meeting my eyes. I didn't need her to say sorry. That wasn't the point anymore. I simply said, "I've always been doing the work. You just weren't paying attention." That interaction taught me another important lesson. Sometimes, the people closest to you won't see your worth until the world forces them to. That doesn't mean your value isn't real. It just means their lens is too cloudy to recognize it yet, and that's okay. Your journey isn't about making them believe. It's about continuing to believe in yourself, even when no one claps for you, even when the room is quiet and doubt is the only voice you hear. Success, I learned, is best served without bitterness. I could have gloated. I could have humiliated them in return, but true success doesn't need a spotlight. It radiates on its own, and in that quiet glow I found peace. I no longer seek validation from my family. If they choose to celebrate me now, that's their choice. But my self-worth was never meant to be measured in their glances or their praise. It was built in the silence, in the grind, in the rejection emails, in the almost gave-ups and the late night breakthroughs. It was built when no one else was watching. And to anyone listening to this who has ever been laughed at, dismissed, or underestimated, I want you to know something. Your path doesn't have to look like anyone else's. You don't need a loud entrance to prove your greatness. You don't need their approval to chase your dream. All you need is the courage to keep building, brick by brick, even when the world pretends you're invisible. You are not too quiet, you are not too slow, you are not too broke to rise. You are simply still in the process of becoming undeniable, and when that moment comes, when your version of docking the yacht arrives, you'll understand. It was never about revenge. It was about reclaiming your voice, your story, and your dignity. So let them laugh, let them roll their eyes, let them cancel your invite, talk behind your back, call you the failure of the family. And then show up anyway.